An eagle dropped a silver spur at his feet. Every step after left tracks of fire. The first light of dawn broke over the canyon rim, painting the sky in strokes of amber and gold. Caleb Harmon stood at the edge, a solitary figure against the vastness. Wind tugged at his weathered coat. 50 years on this earth had carved lines into his face like the dry creek beds that scored the valley below. Something caught the new sunlight, flashing bright against the dirt at his boots. A silver spur, ornate and untarnished, as if it had fallen from the sky rather than been lost by some passing rider. Caleb knelt, his knees protesting with a familiar ache. His fingers hovered over the silver, hesitant. A shadow passed overhead. He looked up to see an eagle riding the thermals, wings spread wide against the brightening sky. The bird circled once, then banked away toward the distant mountains. Caleb picked up the spur. It felt heavier than it should, like it carried something more than metal. He turned it over in his palm, watching sunlight dance across the silver star pattern etched into its side. A memory stirred, another spur, another time, when such things had meant freedom. Now it felt like a weight, a reminder. He pocketed the spur and started the long walk back to what remained of the Harmon Ranch. The property stretched across 300 acres of hardscrabble Texas land. Once, it had boasted 200 head of cattle for ranch hands and a main house that glowed with lamplight every evening. Now the cattle were down to 40, the hands long gone, and most nights the house sat dark except for the single window of the kitchen where Caleb took his meals alone. His boots kicked up dust as he crossed the yard. The barn needed paint. The corral fence sagged where he'd been meaning to replace posts. Everything waited for attention he couldn't seem to give anymore. Inside the house, photographs hung crooked on walls. Sarah smiled from behind glass, frozen 20 years ago before she decided that loving a man who loved the land more than anything wasn't enough. Their son Daniel stared from another frame, 18 and proud in his army uniform, before Afghanistan had swallowed him whole. Caleb set the silver spur on the kitchen table and made coffee. The morning ritual. Grounds into pot. Water to boil. The routine that kept him moving forward one day to the next. Later, he rode out to check the fence line along the eastern boundary. The work kept his hands busy while his mind wandered. The old Palomino knew the route well enough that Caleb barely needed to guide her. Near the property line stood an ancient oak, its trunk twisted by decades of prairie winds. As he approached, something caught his eye, a corner of leather protruding from the ground near the roots, as if the earth were giving up a secret. Caleb dismounted, tied the horse, and knelt. His fingers dug into the dirt, pulling free what turned out to be a leather satchel, cracked with age but still intact. The brass buckle opened with surprising ease. Inside lay a sealed envelope, yellowed but preserved. His name written across the front in handwriting he recognized immediately. Eliza. His heart quickened. 58 years old, and his pulse still jumped at the sight of her penmanship. The letter was dated 15 years ago. The paper crackled as he unfolded it. Caleb, it began. I've written this letter 100 times in my head. By the time you find it, if you find it, I might be gone from this world. I buried this beneath our tree because I couldn't bear to hand it to you directly. Some truths are easier told from a distance. He read on, standing in the shadow of the oak tree as Eliza's words flowed across the pages. She wrote of love that never died, of choices made in haste and regretted at leisure. She wrote of a life they might have shared if either of them had been brave enough to break the silence that grew between them after that summer. There are things you don't know, she wrote. Things I should have told you. Come find me if you want to hear them. I'll be waiting where the river bends twice. The last line struck him like a physical blow. Where the river bends twice. Their place, all those years ago. Caleb folded the letter and returned to his horse. The day stretched before him, suddenly different. The fence would wait. Back at the ranch house, he washed the dust from his face and hands. The mirror above the sink reflected a stranger, gray hair, weathered skin, eyes that had seen too much and said too little. He thought of Eliza as she had been at 20. Dark hair and eyes that seemed to look right through him. The only woman who had ever understood his silences. Before Sarah. Before the ranch consumed him. Before life hardened into the shape it took. Caleb saddled the Palomino again and rode toward town. Millsville hadn't changed much in 30 years. The main street still consisted of a general store, post office, small library, and the watering hole saloon. A few newer businesses had sprouted up, a chain drugstore, a bank branch, but the heart of the place remained the same. He tied his horse outside the general store. The bell above the door announced his entrance. Well, look what the wind blew in. Tom Fisher stood behind the counter, his white beard neatly trimmed, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Twice in 1 month. Must be some kind of record. Need some supplies, Caleb said. Tom nodded, waiting for more. When nothing came, he sighed. You Harmons and your way with words. Your daddy was the same. Man could go a week saying nothing but yep and nope. Caleb managed a small smile. Runs in the blood. What can I get you? Coffee. Flour. Some of that canned stew. He paused. You remember Eliza Winters? Tom's eyebrows rose. Now there's a name I haven't heard in years. Sure. I remember her. Pretty girl. Moved away after her daddy died. Must be 20 years ago now. Any idea where she went? Tom's eyes narrowed with curiosity. Can't say I do. Her mother might know. Margaret still lives out on Cherry Lane. That little white house with the blue trim. Caleb nodded. Add some sugar to that order. Outside, the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. Caleb crossed the street to the library, a small brick building that had been new when he was a boy. Miss Abernathy still presided over the front desk, her hair now white but her posture as rigid as ever. Mr. Harmon, she said, peering over her glasses. What brings you to our little repository of knowledge? Looking for information on someone. Eliza Winters. Public records are in the back room. Town directories and such. Newspaper archives too, though they only go back to 1950. He thanked her and made his way to the small research room. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the window. Caleb pulled down directories and scanned for Winters. Nothing recent. The newspaper archives yielded more. A small article from 15 years ago. Local woman returns to care for ailing mother. The piece mentioned Eliza briefly, noting she had returned from Denver to look after Margaret Winters after a stroke. Another, dated 3 years later, Winters' estate sale draws crowd. It mentioned Eliza would be returning to Colorado following her mother's passing. Caleb sat back, processing this information. The letter had been written 15 years ago, when she first returned. She had been here, in Millsville, while he worked his fences and rode his boundaries, never knowing how close she was. As he was about to leave, Miss Abernathy approached with a leather-bound book. Found this in the donation box last month. Thought you might be interested. She handed it to him and walked away before he could respond. The journal's cover was soft with age. No name marked it as belonging to anyone, but when Caleb opened it, he recognized the handwriting immediately. Eliza's journal. He almost closed it. Reading a woman's private thoughts felt like trespassing. But the first entry caught his eye. Saw Caleb Harmon in town today. He didn't see me. His hands trembled slightly as he turned the pages. Entries spanned the 2 years Eliza had spent caring for her mother. She wrote of daily routines, her mother's declining health, and memories that surfaced in the town where she'd grown up. And she wrote about him. I drive past the ranch sometimes, just to see the place, just to know he's still there. I wonder if he ever thinks of me. Heard in town his wife left years ago. His son died overseas. So much loss. I know something about that now. I dream sometimes of that summer. The river. The promises we made. The ones we broke. The final entry was dated shortly after her mother's funeral. Leaving tomorrow. I've written him a letter, left it where we used to meet. Maybe he'll find it. Maybe he won't. Some things aren't meant to be uncovered. Caleb closed the journal, feeling like he'd intruded on something sacred. He returned to the front desk. Where did this come from? He asked Miss Abernathy. Margaret Winters' estate. Most of her books came here after she passed. This was among them. She studied him over her glasses. I thought it might find its way to the right hands eventually. Outside, the afternoon had aged into evening. Shadows stretched long across the street. Caleb mounted his horse and rode slowly through town, seeing it differently now. These buildings, these streets had held Eliza while he remained oblivious, wrapped in his own isolation. He passed the old church where they'd first met at a harvest dance. The schoolhouse where they'd shared their first kiss behind the building while a baseball game continued without them. The movie theater, now closed, where they'd sat in the back row more interested in each other than whatever played on the screen. Every corner held ghosts. Every step stirred memories he'd thought long buried. At the edge of town, he turned toward Cherry Lane. The little white house with blue trim sat back from the road, surrounded by overgrown rose bushes. A for sale sign stood in the yard, weathered by several seasons. Caleb dismounted and approached the porch. Through the windows, he could see empty rooms. No furniture. No life. Just us catching the last light of day. He sat on the porch steps, trying to imagine Eliza here, caring for her mother, writing in her journal, thinking of him. The distance between them, just a few miles of Texas dirt road, seemed both trivial and insurmountable. Night was falling as he returned to the ranch. The house waited, dark and silent. He lit a lamp in the kitchen and placed the journal on the table beside the silver spur. Two artifacts of a life he hadn't lived. Sleep eluded him. He sat in the kitchen until dawn, reading and rereading Eliza's words, piecing together the story of her return and departure. The coffee grew cold in his cup. As morning light crept across the floorboards, Caleb made a decision. He would go to the river, where it bends twice. The ride took an hour. The path was overgrown now, but his body remembered the way even after 30 years. The cottonwoods still lined the bank, their leaves shimmering silver green in the morning light. The river ran lower than it once had, but the sound of water over stones remained unchanged. The bend came into view, a gentle curve followed by a sharper turn that created a small, secluded beach. Their place, where they had swum on hot summer days, where they had lain on a blanket under stars, where they had made promises neither kept. Caleb dismounted and walked to the water's edge. No sign remained of those days. No initials carved in trees. No remnant of youthful passion. Just the river, flowing on as it always had. He sat on a flat rock and watched the water. The letter had said she would wait here, but that was 15 years ago. A lifetime. Still, he waited, not quite sure what he expected. Midday came and went. The sun tracked across the sky. Caleb remained, letting memories wash over him like the river current. He remembered Eliza at 18, fearless and bright. How she had wanted to leave Millsville, see the world. How he had wanted to stay, work the ranch his father and grandfather had built. Their last night together, they had argued here on this very spot. She had asked him to come with her to Denver. He had asked her to stay. Neither would bend. The silence that followed lasted 3 decades. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Caleb finally understood. Eliza wasn't coming. Perhaps she never had been. The letter, the journal, they were her way of making peace with the past, of letting go. He pulled the silver spur from his pocket and studied it. The sun caught the metal, sending shards of light dancing across the ground. An eagle's cry sounded overhead, and he looked up to see the same bird, or one like it, circling above the river. Something settled in his chest, a weight lifting. He tucked the spur away and mounted his horse for the ride home. The next morning, Caleb rose before dawn. He dressed carefully in his good shirt, the one he saved for Sundays and funerals. He saddled the Palomino and rode back to town. The post office opened at 8. Marjorie Wilson had worked the counter since they were both young. Her eyebrows rose at the sight of him. Caleb Harmon. Twice in 1 week. The world must be ending. He managed a small smile. Need to find someone's address. In Denver. Marjorie's expression softened. This wouldn't happen to be Eliza Winters, would it? His surprise must have shown on his face. Small town, she said. Word gets around when a man starts asking questions. She pulled out a form. I can't give you her address directly. Privacy laws. But I can forward a letter. Caleb nodded. That'll do. He sat at the small writing desk in the corner and stared at the blank paper. Words had never come easily to him. Finally, he began to write. Eliza, I found your letter. 15 years too late, maybe. I found your journal too. I know you came back. I know you left again. I'm sorry I didn't see you then. I see you now. He wrote about the ranch, about Sarah leaving, about losing Daniel. He wrote about the loneliness that had become so familiar he hardly noticed it anymore. He wrote about finding the silver spur, though he couldn't explain why that seemed important. When he finished, he sealed the envelope and handed it to Marjorie. She promised to send it that afternoon. You know, she said, she calls sometimes. Checks on her mother's house. Making sure the yard gets mowed, that sort of thing. Caleb's heart quickened. When did she call last? About a month ago. Said she might be coming through soon. Thinking of selling the place finally. He thanked her and left, feeling lighter than he had in years. The days that followed took on a different quality. Caleb repaired the corral fence. He bought paint for the barn. He cleaned out Daniel's room, packing away the things he wanted to keep, donating the rest. The work felt different now, not the endless maintenance of a dying ranch, but preparation for something new. A week passed, then another. No word came. On the 30th day after mailing his letter, Caleb rode back to the oak tree where he'd found Eliza's message. The day was hot, the sky a hard, bright blue. He dismounted and stood in the tree's shade, feeling the years pressing down on him. From his pocket, he took the silver spur. He knelt and dug a small hole at the base of the tree, next to where he'd found the satchel. He placed the spur inside and covered it with earth. A burial and a beginning. As he stood, he heard the sound of an approaching vehicle. A cloud of dust rose from the road that ran along his property line. A blue pickup truck appeared, slowing as it neared the oak. The truck stopped. The driver's door opened. She stood in the sunlight, different but the same. Silver threaded her dark hair now. Lines marked the corners of her eyes and mouth. But her stance, the tilt of her head as she looked at him, those were unchanged. "Caleb," she said. His name in her voice unlocked something in his chest. "Eliza." She walked toward him, stopping a few feet away. "I got your letter. I didn't know if you would. I almost didn't come." He nodded, understanding. "I'm glad you did. You buried something," she said, nodding toward the freshly turned earth. "A silver spur. Found it the morning before I discovered your letter. Seemed like a sign." Her smile was soft, tentative. "Always were superstitious." "Not superstitious. Just paying attention." They stood in silence for a moment, 30 years stretching between them. "I should have come back sooner," she finally said. "When Mom got sick. I should have looked for you then. I should have found you after Sarah left. After Daniel." His voice caught. "I've spent too many years not doing things I should have done." Eliza stepped closer. Her hand rose, hesitated, then touched his face. Her palm was warm against his cheek. "We can't get those years back." "No," he agreed. "But there are years ahead." The sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the land. In the distance, the ranch house waited, its windows catching the golden light. "Would you like to come in?" Caleb asked. "I can make coffee." Eliza smiled, and for a moment, he saw her as she had been at 20. "I like that." They walked together toward his truck. With each step, Caleb felt something burning away, regret, perhaps, or the armor of solitude he'd worn for so long. Each footfall seemed to leave an impression deeper than it should, as if he were walking through more than just Texas dirt. As they drove toward the ranch house, the setting sun painted the land in shades of fire. Caleb glanced in the rearview mirror. For a moment, he thought he saw their tracks glowing behind them, burning bright against the gathering dusk. Then the light shifted, and there was only the road, stretching back toward the old oak and forward toward home. Beside him, Eliza gazed out at the land that had shaped them both, her hand resting lightly on the seat between them. Caleb covered her hand with his own. The touch was both familiar and new, like returning to a place remembered from a dream. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Every step might leave tracks of fire, but fire could warm as well as burn, could illuminate as well as destroy. The ranch house grew larger in the windshield. Lights would soon glow in windows that had been dark too long. Words would fill rooms accustomed to silence. And perhaps, in that light and sound, something long dormant would finally have the chance to grow.